Slogans versus convictions. Are we living by principles and convictions and proclaiming truth, or are we just reiterating slogans and sound bites? Hi, Alex McFarland. Welcome to today's edition of the TNG webcast. It's so good to be with you, and thanks for watching. You know, we live in a noisy world. I mean, everybody's talking about everything, and there's so much in the news. And, 10 years ago, people talked about the spin of the news and having your antenna up for, what is being presented versus what is actual truth. I think nowadays everybody kind of watches everything, reads everything, and listens to all the input of media with a little bit of a filter, trying to sift fact from fiction. But I want to talk about the fact that our nation was built on convictions and principles and truth, really. And when it became vividly evident that we weren't completely trying to live up to truth, steps were taken to try to make things right. I know one of the blights on our nation's history has been slavery, but, we are the only nation in history that fought an internal civil war to intentionally, proactively get slavery ended. That is when your convictions cause you to pursue a corrective to, when you've not been living for truth, to at least try to live for truth. But today, I fear slogans have replaced the pursuit of truth. Let me give you an example. I'm on the computer 2 nights ago. I'm answering a bunch of emails, and a guy tears into me because in an interview, I said that all lives matter. And he basically, I want to cut to the chase, because he said, how can you claim to be a Christian? How can you say you're unbiased? How can you say you view people equally when, now listen to this, he said, the American church is the most racist organization in the world. That's what he said. And he said, how do you explain, quote, and I quote, the overwhelming depiction of Jesus as a white man, end of quote. And he went on and he said, there are no white people in the Bible. So I said, well, let's weigh in on this. And to my knowledge, I was as respectful and as academic and as factual as I knew how to be. And I said, I've never heard clergy or laity say that there were Caucasians in the Bible. I've certainly never heard academics, clergy, or laity try to assert that Jesus is a white man. Now, I know that a lot of the art from the Middle Ages ostensibly depicted Jesus in ways that didn't look as Semitic as they might. But while there have been somewhat Caucasian-looking depictions of Jesus in art, I think about Karl Bloch and Warner Selman that painted Jesus that looked, as best they could theorize, what a Jewish man of the first century might have looked like. There have been African-American depictions of Jesus. I was at an Easter play a year ago at probably the largest African-American church in the state of North Carolina, and all the actors on the stage doing this Easter play were black. And Jesus was black, the disciples were black, because it was a play put on at a black church. And I didn't fault them for that. The actors were who they were. But there was a magazine a few years ago that tried to, as best they could, do an assimilation of what Jesus might have looked like, a Semitic person from the first century. And they came up with this rendering of Jesus, probably relatively accurate. But I called this emailer on. I said, give me please a specific example, if you would, of the, quote, overwhelming depiction of Jesus as a white man, end of quote. And he couldn't give me an example. And he said, Alex, because you don't think you're racist, that's proof that you're racist. And I said, well, our ministry, we've done things for all ethnicities in inner cities and 50 states and different continents. We one time raised money and helped take 600 people. 600 we did in 2008. We went to Peru with 400 teens and 200 adults, and we spent over 2 weeks working in the inner cities with South American people that were in abject poverty. We've made multiple trips to Zambia and Africa. and done so many things. And our heart, our home, our wallets have been opened to people of all ethnicities. But he said, you're inherently racist because I said all lives matter. And I said to this person, I said, look, I get it. We should treat people with love and equality and respect and dignity. But you're reciting slogans that may feel good to recite. It may feel good to paint with a broad brush and say that the American church is the most racist organization in North America. But I said, I was with a journalist, a Gannett journalist, not a Christian, and he said to me, he said, the most philanthropy done by any group outside of the U.S. government's welfare programs, the most philanthropy is done by the Christian church. And he said, go to the inner cities. He said, if the church didn't exist, and this particular journalist that was interviewing me, not a Christian, but he was supporting the tax-free status of churches. He said, because of clothes closets, soup kitchens, literacy programs, even free medical clinics. He said the church more than pays its way. And I would agree. And by the way, let me say to those that say the church is racist, I know individuals can be biased, they can be racist, and that's unfortunate. But look, I've been to third world countries, developing nations, all over the world. Show me where there are wells, food programs. Chances are right at the forefront of bettering the human condition are the followers of Jesus and people of faith. I've yet to see a well in Zambia dug by American atheists. I've yet to see a food program in a third world country by People United for the Separation of Church and State, or the secular militant organizations trying to turn our country from God. So be careful about reciting slogans that it feels good to recite, but slogans which have no basis in fact. Now hold that thought. We're going to come back to it. But right now, I want to answer a question or two. And I really appreciate everybody sending questions in. Message us. You can email me, alex@alexmcfarland.com. It will come right to me, and we will get to your questions. Your question may become the content for a future show. But here's a question. Alex, I thank you and Bert for having such wonderful Bible studies. Now, Bert Harper is my co-host on our 5-day-a-week radio show, now in its 11th year exploring the Word. I know we're supposed to study. Now, listen carefully. I know we're supposed to study and love each other, otherwise you won't make it to heaven. Time out. We should study. We should love each other. But that's not how we, quote, make it to heaven. We come to salvation by repenting of our sin and asking the Lord for forgiveness, and He will forgive. Do study. Do love each other. But that's not what gets you to heaven. But he says there's so much hate in the world. I was brought up, and I brought up my family to love everybody. And this person asks, why do they insinuate that you have to be a black person to understand all the injustice we face? Great point. And again, I realize these are inflammatory things to even talk about. And I want to give you listeners carte blanche. If I say things in an inappropriate way, or if I come across as heavy-handed or unloving, call me on it. I am teachable. But I want to say this. You don't have to be black to understand injustice. There have been injustices perpetrated against people that weren't African American. I mean, my goodness, so many ethnicities throughout history have endured racism and injustice. I want to say again, and it's not racist to say this, though my email partner 2 nights ago accused me of it. There's one race, the human race. There are many cultures and ethnicities and behaviors and secondary physical traits, but there's one race, the human race. And we've got to understand that, and we've got to have the courage not only to speak truth, but the courage to hear truth. And I appreciate Anna from Tennessee writing to us. Hey, let me say this. We're giving away a book. and I want you to get a copy of it. Stand Strong America. Now, when you share publicly on your social media platforms, share publicly, you're automatically entered to win a book. I'm giving away the book Stand Strong America. We talk about a lot of the issues going on in the world today from a biblical, historical, factual perspective. I want you to get this book, and I want it to inspire you and bless your life. If you'll share publicly, you're entered to win. But I want to give you a bottom line statement here. And let me share something from a radio interview that I did 2 nights ago. Dr. Alveda King, a friend and a colleague, she is the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Her father, Dr. A.D. King, was right there as part of the civil rights movement. And my friend Alveda King was talking about how in Birmingham, when Fred Shuttlesworth, one of the great leaders of the civil rights movement, one of my absolute heroes of the 20th century. His house was firebombed and a car was burning. And I believe it was the car of Dr. Alveda King's father. And people were, some of the blacks were very upset and very angry. Some had guns. And Alveda King said her dad stood on the hood of a burning car and told everybody, hey, put your weapons away. Violence is not how we're going to do this. We're going to be loving. We're going to return evil with love and good. And I would say this, the civil rights movement succeeded in the 60s because it was not just based on slogans, but based on principles. And it was amazing to hear Dr. King recount how her uncle, her dad, their colleagues, and she herself, through prayer and love and, yes, their voice and consistency and patience, they got the civil rights movement to have traction, and the civil rights legislation was enacted. Listen, slashing and burning and just parroting slogans, that's not going to do it. We have to be people of conviction and people of truth, and our actions and our positions tied to reality, not inflammatory political spin. That's truth. That's truth for a new generation. Thanks for watching the webcast. God bless you. See you again really, really soon.